A young billionaire hires a poor, pregnant and abandoned woman to take care of his daughter, who uses a wheelchair. Until one day the little girl looks at her and says, "If you ever leave, please tell me, so I won't cry the way I did when my mom left me." He hears this in silence, and his reaction brings everyone to tears. The rain wouldn't stop, drumming against the windows of the small coffee shop. Ava wrapped her fingers around the cheap cup of coffee, trying to savor what little warmth it still offered. Her distant gaze wandered through the nearly empty place at that early hour, 3 months pregnant, with nowhere to call home. "More coffee, honey?" asked the gray-haired waitress. Ava shook her head. She couldn't spend more than she already had. Her savings were vanishing day by day, and now with a baby on the way, desperation was beginning to overwhelm her. The coffee shop was modest, with worn formica tables and cracked leather stools. It wasn't pretty, but at least it was warm. Outside, winter battered the city with its biting gusts, forcing people to hurry along, heads down, fighting against the wind. Ava sighed, instinctively rubbing the still barely visible bump under her loose sweater. She hadn't told anyone, not even her ex-boyfriend, who disappeared the moment she mentioned she was late. She was alone, as she'd always been. Her gaze fell upon a crumpled newspaper on the adjacent table. Someone must have left it there, probably in a rush to leave. She hesitated for a moment, then pulled it closer. Maybe there was a job ad inside. The pages were damp around the edges, stained with coffee. She flipped through them without much hope, until her eyes caught a small ad in the corner of the page, looking for a caregiver for a girl who uses a wheelchair. Live-in position. Must be discreet. An address and a phone number completed. The ad giver read the words again, feeling something stir inside her. A live-in position meant a place to stay, a roof over her head, meals provided, a chance. Without a second thought, she tore out the piece of newspaper and slipped it into her worn coat pocket. "Could I use your phone?" she asked the waitress when she passed by again. 15 minutes later, Ava was hurrying through the drizzling rain, following the directions she had scribbled on a napkin. The neighborhood gradually changed, the houses growing larger, farther apart with high walls and imposing gates. When she finally arrived at the address, she stopped, breathless. A wrought iron gate separated the street from the property. Through the bars, she could see a well-tended garden, and in the background, an old stone and wood mansion with tall windows and a wide entrance. She took a deep breath before ringing. "The bell, who is it?" A gruff voice crackled through the intercom. "I'm Ava. I called earlier about the ad in the newspaper." A buzzing sound indicated the gate unlocking, and it opened slowly. Ava walked up the stone path, feeling raindrops stream down her face. Her heart was pounding. She couldn't afford to lose this opportunity. Not now. An older man with a stern expression awaited her at the door. He wore a simple caretaker's uniform and looked at her suspiciously. "Come in," he said curtly, opening the door. "Mr. Dawn is expecting you in his study." The interior of the house was even more impressive than the outside. A spacious foyer with dark wooden floors, carefully preserved antique furniture, and paintings on the walls. Ava felt small and out of place in her wet, shabby clothes. The caretaker led her down a corridor to a carved wooden door. "Wait here," he ordered, knocking softly and entering. Ava tried to smooth her damp hair, attempting to look presentable. She tugged her sweater over her belly, hoping no bump would show. She needed this job. She couldn't let her situation get in the way. The door opened again and the caretaker motioned her inside. The study was elegant, with bookcases reaching the ceiling, an imposing desk, and a low fire crackling in the fireplace. Behind the desk stood a man around 40, observing her intently. "Miss Ava." His voice was deep and measured. "I'm Lucas Dawn. Please have a seat." Ava obeyed, sitting on the edge of the chair, her hands restless in her lap. Lucas Dawn had dark hair lightly streaked with gray at the temples, piercing blue eyes, hand-chiseled features. He wore a pristine dress shirt and had a natural air of authority. "Mr. Victor told me you called about the ad," he began, studying her. "Do you have experience as a caregiver?" "Yes," Ava lied, swallowing hard. "I looked after my grandmother for 3 years." Lucas watched her in silence for a few seconds, as if assessing whether she was telling the truth. "My daughter Emily is 9 years old and uses a wheelchair." She needs help with daily tasks, someone to accompany her lessons, someone available full-time. He paused. The ad mentioned a live-in position, because you would live here. In a room near hers, you'd have Sundays off. Ava nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. It was perfect, exactly what she needed. Why must be discreet? She asked before she could stop herself. A brief flicker of surprise crossed Lucas's face. Emily is private. She doesn't get along well with strangers. I'd rather keep our lives out of the spotlight. Something in the way he said it made Ava suspect there was more to the story, but this wasn't the time to push. Could I meet her? She asked. Lucas hesitated, then nodded. She's probably in the study room. I'll call her. While he left, Ava took the opportunity to look around. Photos in frames on the mantel showed a beautiful blonde woman with a radiant smile. In some pictures, she was with a small girl. Lucas wasn't in any of them. The sound of the door opening made Ava turn. Lucas was back, alone. Emily prefers to watch from a distance first, he explained with a slight apologetic tone. She's very shy. Ava understood, feeling a pang in her chest. There was sadness in the man's eyes when he spoke about his daughter. If you take the job, you can start tomorrow. The pay is good, and, as I said, you'll have room and board. It was more than Ava had hoped for. She felt immense relief. Flood her body. I accept, she answered without hesitation. Lucas looked satisfied, though still guarded. Great. Victor will show you your room and the rest of the house. Tomorrow we'll talk about Emily's routine. As she stood to follow the caretaker, Ava felt a chill run down her spine. Turning instinctively toward the doorway, she saw a girl in a wheelchair, half hidden in the corridor. She had brown hair and wide, inquisitive eyes that stared at Ava intensely, taking in every detail. For a brief moment, their gazes met. The girl didn't smile or wave. She just kept watching with a serious, assessing expression. Hello, Emily, Ava said softly, offering a small smile. The girl didn't respond. She merely wheeled herself back, disappearing into the dark hallway. As she followed Victor to see what would be her new home, Ava couldn't get the child's gaze out of her. Mind? There was something in those eyes, a blend of distrust and hope, fear and curiosity. She lightly touched her stomach, feeling a pang of guilt for keeping her pregnancy a secret, but she had no choice. This house, this job, was her only shot now. What Ava didn't yet know was that walking through that iron gate had been her first step toward finding far more than just shelter. That somber house, with its quiet residents and hidden secrets, would be the place where she would finally discover the meaning of family. The sun had barely risen when Ava opened her eyes in her new room. It took a few seconds to recall where she was. The space was simple but comfortable. A soft bed, a small wardrobe, a desk, and a window overlooking the garden. More room than she'd had in recent months. She sat on the edge of the bed, running her hands over her belly. 3 months. Along wasn't very noticeable yet, but soon it would be impossible to hide. For now, she needed to focus on her job, on earning this family's trust. She dressed quickly, pulling her hair into a simple bun. The clock read 6:30. She didn't know what time Emily woke up, but she wanted to be ready whenever she did. The corridor was silent, broken only by the ticking of an old clock. Ava tiptoed toward the kitchen, memorizing the route. Victor, the caretaker, was already there, preparing coffee. Good morning, Ava said, trying to sound friendly. He just nodded, not smiling. What time does Emily usually wake up? 7, he answered curtly. Mr. Dawn leaves at 8 for work. He'll be back only for dinner. Ava noticed a tray on the counter, complete with a covered plate, a cup, and a neatly folded napkin. Victor followed her gaze. That's Mr. Dawn's breakfast. He prefers it in his room before coming down. And Emily? She eats in the dining room at 7:30. Then she has home lessons until noon. With that, the man took the tray and left Ava alone in the kitchen. She hadn't been given specific instructions, so she decided to prepare breakfast for Emily. She found bread, milk, and fruit, arranging a colorful tray with apple slices shaped like a flower next to toast and jam. At 7:20, she headed upstairs with the tray. She found Emily's door slightly ajar and knocked softly. No answer. Gently, she pushed it open. Emily? Good morning. I brought your breakfast. The room was spacious and surprisingly bright, a contrast to the house's otherwise somber tone. Toys were neatly arranged on shelves, books in order, and a small desk for studying. Emily sat in her wheelchair by the window, watching the garden. She didn't turn when Ava entered. Look, I made a little apple flower for you. Hope you like it. Ava placed the tray on the small table and cautiously approached the girl. Emily remained silent, staring out the window. You like the garden, don't you? It's beautiful. Maybe we can go out there later if you'd like. She spoke casually as if expecting a reply, knowing she probably wouldn't get one. She noticed Emily's fine brown hair, her large, expressive eyes. She would have been a lovely child if not for that distant, sad expression. Shall we have breakfast? It's nice and fresh. Gently, she maneuvered the wheelchair to the table. Emily didn't resist, nor did she help. She let herself be guided like a rag doll. Her eyes, however, tracked Ava's every movement. These toasts look delicious. Want to try one? Ava pretended to eat one herself, smiling, then offered a piece to Emily. The girl didn't reach for it, though her gaze followed the food. That's okay, I'll leave it right here. You can eat when you feel like it. While tidying the room, Ava softly hummed a lullaby. She noticed Emily had turned slightly, watching her surreptitiously. My grandmother used to sing that to me when I was little, she commented casually. She said it scares away the monsters under the bed. For a second, Ava thought she saw a spark of interest in the girl's eyes, but it vanished just as quickly. When she finished tidying, she saw Emily had eaten half a piece of toast and some apple slices. It was a start. The following days settled into a routine. Ava woke up early, made breakfast, helped Emily with her bath and clothes, took her to her home lessons with a private tutor 3 times a week. On other days, Ava read stories to her, organized simple activities. Lucas Dawn was rarely present. He left early and came back late, ate dinner in silence, asked brief questions about Emily's progress, and withdrew to his study. He was polite, but distant, as though an invisible wall separated him from the world. Emily stayed locked in her own silence. Ava discovered, through brief chats with Victor, that the girl had not spoken since the accident that put her in a wheelchair. The same accident that took her mother's life. Before that, she was quite the chatterbox, Victor admitted in a rare moment of openness. Now it's like she's trapped in a bubble. But Ava refused to give up. She kept speaking to Emily as though expecting answers, describing everything she did, sharing stories from her own childhood, singing as she worked. Sometimes she caught Emily's curious gaze, or a slight tilt of the head, as though the girl wanted to follow along more closely. In the kitchen, Ava noticed Emily enjoyed watching her cook. She started narrating each step, explaining why she mixed certain ingredients or why she chose certain spices. See how pretty this dish looks. Colors make all the difference. She served the meals with care, making them visually appealing. She realized Emily ate better when her plate was colorful and nicely arranged. On her second Sunday at the house, her day off, Ava decided not to go anywhere. She felt tired, and besides, she had nowhere to go. She spent the day in her room, resting and reading one of the books she had found in the house's library. Late in the afternoon, she heard a noise in the corridor. She opened the door and found Emily in her wheelchair, parked in front of her, room as though hesitating to knock. "Hi, Emily, want to come in?" The girl didn't respond, didn't gesture, only stayed there with her eyes fixed on Ava. But she didn't resist when Ava gently took hold of the wheelchair and guided her inside. "I was reading an adventure book. Would you like me to read a bit to you?" Emily offered no reply, but her eyes scanned the room curiously. Ava sat on the bed and began reading aloud. After a few minutes, she noticed Emily had moved closer, her gaze locked on the book's illustrations. That was how Lucas found them when he came home earlier than usual. He paused at the door, surprised to see his daughter in Ava's room, apparently engaged by the story. "Mr. Dorn," Ava greeted him with a smile. "We were having an afternoon reading session. Care to join us?" Lucas seemed uncomfortable, as if unsure how to respond to this domestic scene. "No, thank you. I just came to see where Emily was." His voice was controlled, practical. "Dinner will be served in an hour." At dinner that evening, something was different. Emily, who usually kept her eyes on her plate, looked up at Ava a few times, as if expecting her to continue the story. Ava smiled, understanding the silent message. "If you'd like, I can finish. Reading after dinner," she suggested casually. To Lucas's surprise, Emily gave the slightest nod, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. From that day on, small changes began to occur. Ava noticed Emily enjoyed having warm towels after her bath, so she started warming them. She saw the girl preferred her sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares. She also noticed a gleam in Emily's eyes whenever she placed a small vase of fresh flowers in her room each morning. They were simple gestures, little kindnesses that gradually built a bridge over the gulf of silence. One night, while helping Emily get ready for bed, Ava was softly humming. The girl watched her with those big, attentive eyes. "You know," Ava said, tucking the blanket around her, "my grandmother always said that even when we don't speak, our eyes tell stories. And your eyes, Emily, tell very beautiful ones." A tiny movement at the corner of the girl's lips, almost a smile. For Ava, it was as if a door had been unlocked, even if it was still closed. It was a silent victory, and to Ava, it was worth more than any words. Rain was pounding the mansion's windows that Saturday afternoon. Ava looked at the grey sky as she finished tidying Emily's room. The girl was with her private tutor in the study room, focusing on math exercises. 3 weeks had passed since Ava arrived at the house. She felt the first signs of morning sickness receding as she settled into a new routine. Emily still didn't speak, but her expressive eyes said much. Small gestures, a lingering glance, a subtle tilt of the head were her way of communicating. Lucas Dawn remained distant, though Ava noticed small shifts. Sometimes he paused by Emily's bedroom door, listening while Ava read stories to the girl. Other times he asked brief questions about his daughter's day during dinner. Subtle changes, but changes nonetheless. As the rain fell, Ava had an idea. She went to the kitchen, where Victor was preparing lunch. "May I use the kitchen after lunch? I'd like to bake a cake." The caretaker looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "The pantry has flour and sugar. Use whatever you need." After lunch, when Emily went to rest in her room, Ava set about her surprise. She rummaged through cabinets, finding the basic ingredients: flour, sugar, eggs, milk. Nothing fancy, but enough for a simple cake. She laid out bowls, spoons, and a round cake pan on the kitchen counter. She'd learned this recipe from her grandmother years ago. It was a simple recipe, the kind that brings good memories. She got to work, cracking eggs, measuring flour, mixing everything with precise motions. As she worked, she softly hummed a song from her childhood. The kitchen was soon filled with the scent of vanilla and promise. She was so focused that she didn't notice someone had arrived silently. It was only when she heard the gentle squeak of wheelchair wheels that she turned and saw Emily at the kitchen door, watching her curiously. "Hi, Emily, what a nice surprise," Ava smiled, hiding her startle. "I'm making a vanilla cake. It was my grandma's favorite." The girl didn't respond, but her eyes scanned the counter, noticing the scattered ingredients and the creamy batter in the big bowl. "Want to see how it's done?" Ava asked casually. Emily didn't reply, but she rolled her chair a bit closer. Ava continued mixing, explaining each step as though hosting a cooking show. "Now comes the most important part, mixing the batter thoroughly so it has no lumps. You need patience." She looked at Emily, who seemed fascinated by the circular motion of the wooden spoon in the batter. "Do you want to try? I can help you." Emily said nothing, but she didn't pull away when Ava moved the bowl nearer. Carefully, Ava opened a drawer and took out a long-handled spoon. "Look, this spoon is perfect for you. The handle is longer, easier to hold." She placed the bowl on a lower part of the counter, within Emily's reach. Then gently she offered her the spoon. For a moment Ava thought the girl wouldn't take it, but to her surprise, Emily reached out and grasped the spoon. Her movements were clumsy at first. Ava placed her hand over Emily's, guiding her gently. "Yes, that's it. Slow and steady, no hurry." Gradually, Emily began stirring on her own. The batter swirled in the bowl, the ingredients blending together. A small everyday miracle was happening in that kitchen. "That's perfect. You're doing great." While Emily stirred, Ava prepared the pan, greasing it with butter and dusting it with flour. Outside, the rain continued, creating a cozy bubble around them. Once the batter was ready, Ava brought the pan over. Now let's pour the batter in carefully. Together, they tilted the bowl over the pan. The golden batter streamed slowly, filling the pan. Emily watched intently, her eyes missing no detail. Perfect. Now into the oven. Ava set the temperature and placed the cake pan in the preheated oven. Emily stayed beside her, waiting. It'll take about 40 minutes to bake. Meanwhile, we can tidy up the kitchen or... Wait, I have a better idea. She took a bit of leftover batter on her finger and licked it. Delicious. Want to try? She ran her finger along the bowl edge again and offered it to Emily. The girl hesitated, then reached out her small hand and touched the batter, bringing it cautiously to her mouth. Her eyes widened slightly, an almost imperceptible reaction, but it meant everything to Ava. It was as though a small ray of sunshine had entered the kitchen despite the rain. Good, right? Tasting the batter is the best part of baking. While they waited for the cake, Ava washed the utensils. Emily stayed close, sometimes reaching out to help, passing a clean spoon, watching the soap bubbles. The smell of fresh cake began to spread through the kitchen, filling the house with a comforting aroma. It smelled like home, something that had been missing for a long time in those silent halls. When the cake was done, Ava carefully took it out of the oven. It looked perfect, golden on top, soft and fluffy inside. Let's wait for it to cool a bit before removing it from the pan. As they waited, Victor showed up at the kitchen door, drawn by the smell. You made a cake? Yes, Ava smiled. Emily helped me. She's quite the little chef. The caretaker looked at the girl, surprised, as if seeing her for the first time. A faint smile appeared on his lined face. It's been a long time since I've smelled this in the house. Mrs. Dorn, her mother, used to bake cakes on Saturdays. Ava felt a pang in her chest. She hadn't known that. She looked at Emily, worried she might have triggered painful memories, but the girl seemed calm, her eyes on the cooling cake. When they finally took the cake out of the pan, Ava placed it on a pretty plate she found in the cupboard. She cut a slice and offered it to Emily. For the best little helper in the kitchen, Emily accepted the plate on her lap, eyeing the cake for a moment before taking a piece with her fingers. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. Her eyes shone. Lucas Dorn arrived home early that day. He paused in the kitchen doorway, observing an unusual scene. His daughter, the caretaker, and the new housekeeper all gathered around a homemade cake. Hi, Mr. Dorn, Ava greeted him. Emily and I made a cake. Would you like some? He hesitated, as he always did when confronted with close-knit situations. Then he stepped forward and accepted the plate Ava offered. It's very good, he said after tasting it, genuinely surprised. Emily mixed the batter. She has a real knack for cooking. Lucas looked at his daughter, a different look in his eyes, something new, a mix of pride and nostalgia. Your mother loved baking cakes, he said quietly. Emily lifted her gaze to her father, and something unspoken passed between them, a momentary connection, fleeting yet real. That night after dinner, Lucas asked Ava to bring a slice of cake to his study. It was the first time he had made such a request. While helping Emily get ready for bed, Ava noticed a subtle change. The girl seemed more relaxed, more present. After brushing her hair, Emily briefly held Ava's hand, a feather-light touch. There were no words, but that gesture said it all. Later, alone in her room, Ava rested her hand on her belly, feeling a new sense of hope growing within her. Perhaps with patience and kindness, the silences in that house could be filled again. The smell of cake still lingered in the air, mixing with something harder to define. Perhaps it was the scent of affection taking root in arid ground, growing. Slowly, with no hurry, like all valuable things, the rainy days gave way to sunshine. Spring was timidly arriving, bringing color to the mansion's garden. Little green shoots popped up in the flower beds, and the trees donned fresh leaves. Ava watched the changing season through Emily's bedroom window as she adjusted the curtains. The girl sat in her wheelchair, leafing through a picture book, her favorite morning pastime. Look how lovely the garden is today, Ava remarked. How about a stroll outside after lunch? It's warm, and the fresh air will be good for us. Emily lifted her eyes from the book, glancing at the sunny garden. A slight nod. Ava had come to interpret it as agreement. 4 weeks in the mansion, and Ava already understood Emily's silent language. A prolonged gaze meant interest. Restless hands indicated anxiety. A gentle tug on her sleeve was a plea for attention. The child didn't speak, but she communicated in her own way. After lunch, as promised, Ava took Emily to the garden. The sun felt pleasant, not too hot. She guided the wheelchair along the paved stone path, showing the girl the flowers just beginning to bloom. Look at those daisies, and see that tree? It's full of birds. Emily observed everything intently, her bright eyes absorbing every detail. They stopped beneath the cool shade of a large tree near a wooden bench. "Mr. Victor told me there's an old trunk in the garden shed," Ava said casually. "He mentioned it might have some old toys in it. Want to check it out?" Emily turned her gaze to Ava, a silent question in her eyes. "They're your old toys from when you were smaller," Ava explained gently. "They've been stored away. Maybe we'll find something fun." Emily didn't answer, but her fingers fidgeted in her lap, a sign Ava already recognized as curiosity. The shed was at the back of the garden, a small green-painted structure nearly hidden among the bushes. Ava opened the door, taking in the scent of old wood and thyme. "Let's see what we have here." The interior was surprisingly tidy. Gardening tools hung on one wall, a few chairs covered with white sheets, and in the corner stood a dark wooden chest with golden details. "This must be it," Ava murmured, approaching it. She carefully lifted the lid. Inside, surprisingly well organized, were assorted toys. Cloth dolls, colorful wooden blocks, board games, children's books. Wow, a real treasure. Emily leaned forward in her chair, her eyes fixed on the chest's contents. Ava began removing the toys one by one, showing them to the girl. "Look at this doll, her dress is so pretty." It was a rag doll with yarn hair and a polka dot outfit. "And these wooden blocks, you can build a castle." Emily's expression stayed serious, but her eyes followed each item with interest. Ava kept rummaging, finding little cars, a small toy piano, finger puppets. At the bottom of the chest, almost hidden among fabrics, Ava found something different, a perfectly crafted miniature dollhouse. It was detailed, with windows that opened and closed, working doors, spiral staircases, and tiny furniture. "Wow, this is beautiful," she exclaimed, carefully lifting it out and placing it on the shed's floor. Emily's reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened, fixed on the miniature. She maneuvered her chair closer, decisively. "You like it?" Emily reached out, touching the little roof with her fingertips as if checking if it was real. Then gently she opened one of the tiny windows. "Shall we take it outside? There's better light out there," Ava suggested. Carefully she carried the dollhouse outside, setting it on the grass under the tree. Emily followed, maneuvering her wheelchair more skillfully than Ava had seen before. In the sunlight, the house revealed even more details. Miniature curtains in the windows, a porch with rocking chairs, and even a tiny garden with hand-painted flowers. "It's really something special," Ava commented, sitting on the grass beside Emily's chair. "It even has furniture inside, look." She opened the front of the house, revealing decorated rooms, a living room with sofas, a bedroom with a bed, a kitchen with a table and chairs, all in perfect scale. Emily watched, fascinated. Ava removed some of the tiny furniture, placing it on the grass so the girl could see it better. "Look at this little family of dolls. There's a dad, a mum, and a little girl." As she arranged the miniature pieces, Ava improvised a story about the family who lived in the dollhouse, about the garden where they played, the meals they ate, the stories they read at bedtime. Emily listened silently, her eyes traveling from the house to Ava's face and back. One of her hands left the wheelchair's armrest and picked up the smallest doll. "That's the daughter," Ava smiled. "You can give her a name if you like." For several minutes they played in silence. Ava repositioned the furniture. Emily moved the dolls around. It was a silent dance, a form of wordless communication. At one point, Ava picked up the doll, representing the mother, and placed it next to the one Emily held. "Maybe they can plant flowers in the garden. What do you think?" That was when it happened. Emily looked at the dolls in her hand, then at the dollhouse, then up at Ava. Her lips moved slightly, and a barely audible, raspy voice, unused for so long, emerged. "A house, with you." Time seemed to freeze. Ava remained still, afraid any sudden move or overreaction would shatter that fragile moment. "Yes," she replied softly, her voice trembling with contained emotion. "We can play house together." Emily kept gazing at her, her big, expressive eyes seeming to say far more than her few words. What neither of them knew was that they weren't alone. From his study window, Lucas Dorn watched the scene. He had come home early, rare for him, and arrived just in time to witness that little miracle. He saw his daughter speak. Even from afar, he recognized the movement of her lips, the light in her eyes, something he hadn't seen in so long. His hands gripped the windowsill, his fingers pressing hard into the wood. A solitary tear ran down his face, quickly wiped away. In the garden, Ava and Emily continued playing. The girl didn't speak again, but something had changed. There was a new brightness in her movements, a livelier presence in her eyes. Ava felt tears prick at her own eyes, but held them back. She didn't want Emily to think her emotion was sadness or exaggerated surprise. She wanted this moment to feel normal, as though the girl's words were expected, natural. "This dollhouse is so pretty. We can bring it out again tomorrow if you'd like," she said casually, though her heart was racing. Emily nodded, still holding the little doll carefully. They continued to play until the sun began to set, painting the sky orange. Ava put the dollhouse and dolls back in the chest, promising they'd return the next day. When they entered the house, Lucas was in the hall as if he'd just arrived. His gaze met Ava's for a brief moment, a look brimming with contained emotion, full of unspoken questions. "We had a lovely afternoon in the garden," Ava said, pushing Emily's wheelchair. "We found some old toys in the shed." "Good," he replied, his voice controlled as usual, but with something different in his eyes. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Ava stayed by her bedside a little longer than usual. She watched the girl's peaceful face, thinking about those two simple words that had broken 2 years of silence. "A house with you." They weren't just words. They were an invitation, an open door, a beginning. Something had started to shift in that house as surely as spring was transforming the garden outside. The word was like a seed planted in fertile soil. After that afternoon in the garden, something bloomed inside Emily, slowly like all precious things, yet with surprising strength. The next morning, when Ava entered Emily's room carrying breakfast, the girl greeted her with different eyes. More alert, more present. "Good morning," Ava smiled, placing the tray on the small table. "Did you sleep well?" Emily hesitated, as if testing her own voice. Then, in a nearly inaudible whisper, "Yes." A simple word, only 3 letters, but it made Ava freeze momentarily. She disguised her surprise, continuing naturally, as though Emily talking was entirely normal. "That's great. Look, there's fresh orange juice today." During breakfast, Emily didn't speak further, yet something had changed. Her eyes followed Ava with a new attentiveness, as though summoning courage to form more words. Ava didn't push. She knew that, like a frightened bird, Emily's voice needed to feel safe to emerge, so she kept talking normally, describing her plans for the day, asking questions that allowed for short answers or just gestures. It happened again during her lesson with Mrs. Pereira, the private tutor, a gentle, middle-aged woman. They were working on a math problem that seemed to confuse Emily, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I don't understand," Emily said suddenly, her voice low but clear. Mrs. Pereira dropped her pencil, startled. She glanced toward Ava, who was shelving books on the other side of the room. "I think this problem is a bit tough," Ava interjected softly, as though it were the most natural thing in the world that Emily had spoken. "Maybe we can try another approach." Taking the hint, the tutor composed herself and carried on, explaining the math problem differently, using a more visual method. Emily listened carefully, and to their surprise responded in a low voice when asked to solve the next equation. After Mrs. Pereira left, still visibly emotional over what she had witnessed, Ava sat beside Emily. "You did great in class today," Emily looked at her, her face serious as ever, but with a new light in her eyes. "Hard," she commented, referring to the math exercises. "Yes, it can be tricky," Ava agreed. "But you're smart. You'll get it." A small smile appeared on Emily's face, so brief it might have been imagined, but it was there. Ava decided not to tell Lucas right away. She wanted to give Emily time, let her get comfortable with her own voice before it became a subject of attention and expectation. In the following weeks, words began to emerge more frequently, short phrases, often incomplete, but each was a precious treasure. Water, please. I like this book. Pretty sun today. Along with the words came other signs of life. One day, while Ava told a funny story about a dog chasing its own tail, Emily laughed. A low laugh, almost a whisper, but genuine. Ava's heart warmed at the sound. She kept telling the story, exaggerating her gestures just to hear that soft laugh again. A new routine formed. Every morning after breakfast, Ava planned activities that might interest Emily. She found the girl had a gift for drawing, so on her day off she bought colored pencils and special paper. "Look what I got," she said excitedly. "We can draw together." Emily accepted the pencils carefully, as though they were precious items. Her drawings, at first tentative, grew bolder in color and shape over the days. "That's beautiful," Ava praised, admiring the vibrant flowers on the page. "You're really talented." "Mom used to draw," Emily said simply. It was the first time she'd mentioned her mother. Ava felt a twinge in her chest, but kept her smile. "She passed on a special gift to you, then." Emily nodded, eyes fixed on her drawing. Then, surprisingly, she added, "She went away. She's in heaven now." Ava hesitated, unsure how to respond. She chose simple honesty. "Yes, she's in heaven, but I'm sure she's happy seeing you draw so well." Emily seemed to accept that, turning back to her coloring with renewed focus. Their activities multiplied with time. Ava discovered a beading kit at a local craft store. Emily loved the bright colors and the careful precision needed to string the tiny beads. "This one's for you," she said one day, presenting Ava with a bracelet of blue and green beads. "It's beautiful. I'll wear it every day," Ava promised, putting it on immediately. By chance, Lucas noticed the bracelet during dinner. "Nice piece of jewelry," he commented casually. "Emily made it for me," Ava said, seeing the surprise on Lucas's face. "Emily?" The girl looked at her father, then at Ava, then back at her plate. "I made it," she confirmed softly. Lucas looked as though the air had been knocked from him. It was the first time he'd heard his daughter speak in 2 years. His fork remained, suspended in mid-air, forgotten. "It's very pretty," he finally managed, voice hushed. The silence that followed was different from the usual hush of the house. There was tension and anticipation. Ava decided to break the moment before it grew awkward. "Emily's made quite a few bracelets. Maybe she'll make you one too." Emily hesitated, looking at her father. Then, with a slight nod, she agreed. "Blue?" she asked him, her voice still soft but clear. Lucas swallowed hard, visibly moved. "Blue is my favorite color," he answered, voice gentler than Ava had ever heard. After that evening, something shifted in the house's dynamic. Lucas started coming home earlier. Sometimes he appeared during Emily and Ava's activities, observing quietly from a distance, present but not interfering. Ava saw the conflict in his eyes, fear that this new, talking, softly laughing Emily might vanish at any moment. And admiration, a spark of hope that made his blue eyes shine brighter. Spring reached its peak when Ava had the idea for the garden. She noticed Emily liked watching the flowers from the window, so she suggested, "How about we make our own flower bed? We can plant colorful blooms." Emily's eyes lit up at the suggestion. The next day, with Victor's help, they set up a small bed near the tree where they had found the dollhouse. The wheelchair was no obstacle. Ava adapted the tools, put oversized gloves on Emily's little hands, and arranged the potted seedlings within easy reach. Together they dug holes, placed the tiny plants, and watered them gently. "These are petunias," Ava explained. "They'll bloom purple, and these daisies will be white." "Mom liked sunflowers," Emily noted, pointing to an empty spot in the flower bed. "Sunflowers are wonderful," Ava agreed. "We can plant some right here." The following week, Ava brought sunflower seeds. Emily planted them with special care, her delicate fingers covering them with soil. "Will they grow taller than me?" she asked, looking at Ava. "Much taller," Ava promised. "Sunflowers can get huge, taller than your dad even." Emily giggled at the thought. her gentle laughter now appearing more often. Lucas watched these garden sessions from a distance, like a spectator at a miracle he was afraid to disrupt. Ava noticed him peering through the window, or standing quietly in a doorway, while they worked on crafts or read stories. One afternoon, after Emily had fallen asleep following a busy day, Lucas asked Ava to come to his study. "I want to thank you," he said simply, looking at her with an intensity that made her blush a little. "I don't know how you did it, but—" "It wasn't me," Ava interrupted gently. "It was Emily. She just needed to feel safe enough to try again." Lucas nodded, raking a hand through his hair in a gesture Ava recognized as an attempt to contain emotion. For 2 years, the specialist said it could be permanent. The trauma of the accident, losing her mother so abruptly, his voice broke. "I'd lost hope. Sometimes it does go like that," Ava said softly. "Hope comes and goes. What matters is it's here now." Lucas studied her with curiosity, as though seeing something new. "You're a special person, Ava. This house, all of us are lucky to have found you." Weeks turned into months. Ava's belly was growing more noticeable, but with loose clothing she still managed to hide it. She knew she would have to tell the truth soon, but she was afraid of losing everything she had built. Emily kept making progress. Her sentences grew longer, her laughter more frequent. One day she surprised Ava by asking about the book she read. "At bedtime, can I see?" she asked, reaching for the novel Ava kept on her bedside table. "Sure," Ava smiled, handing it over. "It's a love story." Emily flipped through the pages, her eyes skimming the words. "Do you like love stories?" she asked, returning the book. "Yes," Ava admitted. "I find all stories interesting, but love stories are special." Emily looked thoughtful for a moment. Then she asked unexpectedly, "Have you ever loved someone?" The question caught Ava off guard. She thought about the father of her child, a love that ended before it truly began. She thought about her own parents, who she barely remembered, and her grandmother, who had raised her with tenderness until she passed away. "Yes," she answered honestly. "Several people, in different ways." "What's it like?" Emily persisted, her wide eyes full of curiosity. Ava paused to consider. "It's like a warm place inside you, a place that's happy when you see that person, that misses them when they're gone, that wants their well-being more than your own." Emily mulled that over seriously. Then, in a quiet voice, as if confessing a secret, "I think I have that warm place for you." Ava felt her heart clench. Carefully, she took Emily's small hand in hers. "I have that warm place for you too, sweetheart." That evening, after reading her usual bedtime story, Ava was about to leave the room when Emily's voice stopped her. "Stay until I fall asleep?" Ava turned around, surprised by the request. It was the first time Emily had asked her to stay. "Of course I'll stay," she replied, returning to sit on the edge of the bed. Emily settled under the covers, her eyes fixed on Ava. "Could you tell me another story?" she asked. "What kind of story would you like?" Emily considered for a moment. "A happy story, with a good ending." Ava smiled and began an improvised tale about a girl planting a magic garden where each flower granted a different wish. She described the flowers' colors, the animals visiting, and the special wishes the girl made. As she spoke, she gently stroked Emily's hair, a gesture that had become natural between them. Her voice grew quieter as she saw Emily's eyelids drooping with sleep. By the time the story ended, Emily was almost asleep. She murmured drowsily, "Thank you for staying." "I'll always stay when you need me," Ava promised. Emily reached out and held Ava's hand firmly. "Don't go away, okay?" The child's innocent plea pierced Ava like an arrow. She thought about her pregnancy, about her uncertain future. "I'm not going anywhere," she replied, hoping fate would allow her to keep that promise. Emily fell asleep holding Ava's hand. Ava stayed there, watching the girl's serene face, long lashes resting on her cheeks, breathing softly. She felt her own baby move gently inside her belly, as if being lulled by the story as well. What Ava didn't know was that Lucas had stopped in the hallway on his way to his own room. He heard part of the bedtime story, Ava's gentle voice speaking of a magic garden, and Emily's sleepy replies. He stood there, motionless, listening to that intimate moment. When he heard Emily ask Ava not to leave, and Ava's quiet yet emotion-filled answer, "I'm not going anywhere," something inside him broke. The armor he had carefully built around his heart since losing his wife crumbled silently. He retreated without a sound, not wanting to interrupt that sacred moment between his daughter and the woman who had brought back Emily's voice. In the privacy of his room, he sat on the edge of his bed and covered his face with his hands. For the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to cry. They weren't tears of pain or loss like the many he had shed after the accident. These tears were different, born of gratitude, hope, and a feeling he had forgotten existed. The house that had been silent for so long was speaking again. And he, who had shut himself away from the world, felt his heart relearning a language he thought he'd lost, the language of love. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long days and cloudless skies. The garden Emily and Ava had planted was now in full bloom, with sunflowers reaching impressive heights, just as Ava had promised. On that Saturday morning, the heat was comfortable, not stifling. A light breeze danced through the trees, scattering shifting shadows across the neatly kept lawn. Ava woke up early as usual, but felt a different kind of fatigue. Her pregnancy, now in its 5th month, was getting harder to hide. Loose clothes no longer concealed her rounded belly as well, and that morning, looking in the mirror, Ava realized she couldn't put off this conversation much longer. But not today. Today would be special. She had planned a surprise for Emily. After breakfast, while Lucas prepared to leave to take care of some errands at the office, Ava approached Emily, who was leafing through a book in the living room. "I have a fun idea." "For today," she said, eyes shining with excitement. Emily looked up, curious. In the past few months, her face had grown so much more expressive, her eyes revealing emotions that once stayed hidden. "What is it?" she asked. "It's a surprise," Ava replied with a playful smile. "But we'll need old clothes, something we don't mind getting messy." Emily's eyes widened, intrigued. "Messy? Yes, it'll be quite a mess, but I promise it'll be fun." A smile spread across Emily's face, that new smile that still felt fresh like a newly bloomed flower. "All right." After Lucas left, promising to return for lunch, Ava helped Emily find an old t-shirt in the back of her closet. It was huge, falling almost to her knees, perfect for what Ava had planned. "Now let's head to the garden," she announced, pushing the wheelchair down the hallway. The day was perfect, sunny and calm. Ava chose a spot under partial shade near the big tree, close to the flower bed they had planted together. With Victor's help, who'd become more friendly over the months, she spread a large tarp on the ground. Emily watched curiously as Ava set out several containers on top of the tarp. "What's that?" "Paint," Ava declared happily, opening the lids to reveal vibrant colors: red, blue, yellow, green, purple. "Safe, non-toxic paint. We can do finger painting." Emily's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Finger painting? Like babies do?" Ava laughed at her observation. "Not just babies. Plenty of famous artists paint with their hands. It's a different way to experience art," she explained, laying large sheets of paper on the tarp. "Shall we try?" Carefully, Ava positioned Emily's wheelchair at the edge of the tarp so she could easily reach the paper and paint. Ava knelt beside her on the tarp. "First, pick a color you like." Emily pointed to the blue right away. "That one? Great choice," Ava smiled, dipping her fingers in the blue paint and pressing them onto the paper, leaving colorful marks. "See? It's simple. You can make dots, lines, or mix colors." Emily eyed the paint, then her own hands, as if considering the proposition. There was a hint of hesitation, fear of the unknown or of making a mess. Ava waited patiently, not pushing her. Finally, Emily reached out and dipped her fingertips into the blue paint. The cold, slimy sensation made her giggle softly. "It feels weird," she remarked, not disliking it. "Try it on the paper," Ava encouraged. Emily pressed her fingers against the white sheet, leaving small blue imprints. Her eyes widened at the result. "Look," she exclaimed, genuine excitement in her voice. "It's beautiful," Ava agreed. "Want to do more?" That initial mark seemed to break a barrier. Emily dipped her fingers more boldly, then her entire palm, creating patterns on the paper. Strokes, circles, abstract forms. Ava followed her lead, painting on her own sheet, occasionally suggesting new colors or shapes. At first, Emily was methodical, cautious, but gradually the joy of the moment took over. "Can I mix blue and yellow?" she asked, already swirling the colors together. "Sure. Do you know what happens when we mix blue and yellow?" Emily shook her head. "It makes green," Ava explained, showing how the colors changed between her fingers. The magic of color transformation enchanted Emily. Soon she was experimenting with every combination, encouraged by Ava's enthusiastic reactions to each new discovery. Time passed without them noticing. Sheets of painted paper were spread out on the top, drying under the sun while new ones took their place. Both of their hands were covered in a rainbow of paint. It happened while Emily was busy mixing red and blue. She was so focused on creating purple that she didn't notice a drop of paint splashing onto her face. Ava saw it and laughed gently. "Hold on. You've got paint on your face," she said, reaching for a rag. Emily touched her cheek, smearing more paint around. Seeing her fingers come back even more colorful, something unexpected happened. She started to laugh, not the subdued laugh Ava knew, but a genuine, carefree giggle. It was a sound the house hadn't heard in years. Pure, childish joy with no holding back. "Look at my face," she exclaimed, laughing and pointing at her reflection in a small puddle of water nearby. Ava's heart overflowed at that sound. Without thinking, she dipped her finger into the red paint and dabbed a dot on her own nose. "Now look at me," she said, making a silly face. Emily laughed even harder, her eyes shining with delight. With a sudden burst of spontaneity, she reached out and drew a blue streak on Ava's cheek. "Now you're a cat," she declared between giggles. "Oh, really? Then you're going to be a..." Ava dipped her finger into the yellow paint and drew a circle on Emily's forehead. "A sunshine princess." What followed was a colorful paint battle filled with laughter, always with caution, never crossing limits, but fully embracing the game. Emily laughed louder and more freely than Ava had ever heard, her face lit up with a joy that seemed from another time before life's shadows stole it away. Neither realized they had an audience. Lucas had come back earlier than planned. Finding the house empty, he followed the sound of laughter into the garden. He stopped a few yards away, hidden by the house's shadow, his heart pounding. There, under the light filtering through the leaves, was his daughter, not the somber, silent girl of the past 2 years, but a vibrant child with a face covered in bright paint, laughing openly, her eyes alive with happiness. He saw Ava beside her, equally covered in paint, playing as though there were no tomorrow. He saw the gentle way she adjusted the wheelchair's position whenever needed, without making it an issue, just part of their shared dance. Something clenched in Lucas's throat, a surge of emotion so strong he could barely breathe. It was like seeing a ghost, the ghost of the daughter he thought he'd lost forever the day he lost his wife. He couldn't bring himself to step forward. He feared his presence might shatter the spell, banish the laughter, dispel the magic. So he stood there motionless, silently witnessing the miracle happening in his own garden. He eventually turned away, unnoticed. In the privacy of his study, he sank into a leather armchair and let the tears flow. Quietly, not tears of grief, but of a complex mix of emotions. Relief, gratitude, hope, and perhaps guilt that he wasn't the one to reignite that laughter. Outside, the game continued. When they finally grew tired, Ava and Emily surveyed their work. Dozens of brightly painted sheets spread out to dry, their clothes and faces unrecognizable beneath layers of paint. "We need to clean up before lunch," Ava noted, eyeing her. Multicolored hands. Emily nodded, still smiling. Then, as she looked at the creations strewn about, a sudden shift crossed her face. A shadow darkened her eyes, a sudden seriousness. "I really like today," she said softly, her voice calm now. "Me too," Ava replied, beginning to gather the paintings so they wouldn't blow away. "We can do this again sometime." Emily fell silent, her fingers absently toying with the partially dried paint on her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "If you ever leave, just tell me. so I won't cry like I did when my mom left." Time seemed to stand still. Ava felt as though the air had been sucked from her lungs. The brutal simplicity of the girl's words, the pain behind them, the fear so openly displayed, it struck like a punch to the gut. She looked at Emily, her eyes large and earnest, her face still streaked with cheerful paint that contrasted cruelly with the sadness in her words. She felt her own baby move in her belly, a silent reminder of the secret she carried, the truth she'd soon have to face. "Emily," she began, her voice catching. What could she say? How could she promise never to leave when her future was so uncertain? How could she explain that she carried another life inside her, a life arriving soon to change everything? She swallowed the lump in her throat and did the only thing she could. She knelt by Emily's wheelchair and hugged her, smearing more paint on both of them, not caring at all about the mess. "I won't go anywhere without letting you know," she finally said, the words coming with difficulty. "I promise." Emily returned the hug, her thin arms holding Ava tight, as though she might vanish any second. Neither of them knew that Lucas had come back to the garden, intending to finally join in. Standing at the doorway that led outside, he overheard Emily's words. Those simple words, laden with so much fear and pain, hit him like lightning. "If you ever leave, please tell me, so I won't cry like I did when my mom left me." His legs gave out. He leaned against the doorframe, the weight of that sentence crushing his chest. The fear his daughter carried, the trauma of abandonment, the pain he thought he had shielded her from, it was all there, exposed in the brutal honesty of a child's words. It was too much. Lucas slid down the wall until he sat on the ground, unable to remain standing. He covered his face with his hands, trying to stifle the sound of his own sobs. In that moment, all three of them were bound by the same feeling, even if they didn't realize it: the fear of being left behind. Emily, who lost her mother so young. Lucas, whose world collapsed in a single day. And Ava, who never had a place she truly belonged and now feared losing what she had found. It was an invisible bond, stronger than any tied by blood. A connection, forged in shared pain, mutual fear, and the fundamental human need not to be abandoned. The sun continued shining in the clear blue summer sky. The colorful paint dried slowly on the top. But there in that garden under the midday light, something deeper solidified. The silent recognition that broken hearts could find their way back together, forming something new, something whole, something that resembled a family. Nightfall gently descended upon the mansion. Ava had just put Emily to bed after a long day of activities. The girl had fallen asleep almost instantly, worn out from an afternoon of games and laughter. It was amazing how much she had changed in the past few weeks, talking more, laughing, often her eyes shining with a life that once seemed extinguished. Ava closed the bedroom door quietly and walked down the hallway to her own room. She felt equally exhausted. Her pregnancy, now impossible to disguise under loose clothes, made each day more challenging. She knew she couldn't delay the conversation she dreaded with Lucas much longer. She was nearly at her door when she heard a voice behind her. "Ava." She turned to see Lucas at the end of the corridor. He looked different from his usual immaculate suit. He wore simple clothes, dark pants, and a shirt with the sleeves rolled up to the elbows. He seemed younger, less formal that way. "Mr. Dawn," she responded automatically. "Lucas," he corrected, a faint smile touching his lips. "After everything, I think you can call me by my name." Ava nodded, surprised by his request. Despite the progress made in recent weeks, a certain formality had still lingered between them. "Do you have a moment?" he asked gently. "I'd like to talk to you." "Of course," she answered, trying to hide the sudden nervous flutter in her chest. Would this be about her growing belly he must have noticed? Had he put the pieces together? "Let's go to the garden," he suggested. "It's a pleasant evening." Ava followed in silence as they descended the stairs and crossed the living room. Through the back door they stepped into the garden, illuminated by a full moon and a few strategically placed lights among the flower beds. The air was fresh, scented by night-blooming flowers. The sunflowers Emily had planted months ago were now tall silhouettes against the starry sky. Lucas walked to a wooden bench beneath the large tree and sat, gesturing for Ava to join him. For a few moments, neither spoke. Lucas seemed to be contemplating the stars, his profile highlighted by the moonlight. Ava waited patiently, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "It's incredible how this garden has changed," he said at last. "It used to be just trimmed grass, and a few shrubs. Now it's so full of life." "Emily has a knack for the garden," Ava replied. "She really cares about the plants." Lucas nodded, a gentle smile on his face. Just like her mother. It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife so directly. Ava stayed quiet, sensing this was only the beginning of something he needed to share. Lucas drew a deep breath, as if gathering courage. Then he turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers in the dim light. "Thank you," he said simply. 2 syllables, yet they carried so much meaning that Ava felt her heart constrict. "For what?" she asked softly, though she already knew. "For bringing my daughter back," he replied, voice trembling slightly. "For giving this house its life again." Ava shook her head gently. Emily was always there. She just needed to feel safe enough to return. Lucas shifted his gaze to a distant spot in the garden. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable. "You might have heard about the accident. About how we lost Clara." Ava nodded silently. Victor had briefly mentioned a car accident, but the details were a mystery. "It was 2 years ago, a rainy night. The road was slippery." He paused, swallowing hard. "Clara was driving. Emily was in the back seat. Another car veered into our lane." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if reliving it. "Clara died instantly. Emily had serious spinal injuries. The doctors said she'd never walk again." Ava felt tears forming, but held them back. This moment was his, not hers. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. Lucas opened his eyes, gazing at the star-filled sky. "What nobody knows, what I've never told anyone." He hesitated, voice barely a whisper. Clara was leaving. Ava held her breath, surprised by the revelation. We'd argued that night. It had been building for years. She said she couldn't take it anymore. She needed space. She took Emily and some bags. His voice caught. He cleared his throat before continuing. "If we hadn't fought, if I hadn't said those things, they wouldn't have been on that road that night." The weight of guilt in his voice was almost tangible. Ava understood then the burden Lucas had carried silently all these years. Not just grief, but the sense of responsibility for it. "It wasn't your fault," she said gently. "Accidents happen. No one can predict them." Lucas shook his head as though he couldn't accept absolution. "Emily stopped talking after the funeral. The doctors said it was trauma, that it might pass in time. But days turned to weeks, weeks into months. And you thought you'd never hear her voice again," Ava supplied softly. "I hired top specialists. I tried everything." His shoulders slumped. "Maybe the problem was me. Maybe I reminded her of the fight, of her mom, of everything we lost. Or maybe she just needed time," Ava suggested. "Time and someone who saw her beyond the wheelchair, beyond the silence." Lucas turned toward her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Someone like you." Ava felt her cheeks heat under that intense gaze. "I only did what anyone would do," she deflected, uncomfortable with the praise. "No," he countered firmly. "Not just anyone. You." A silence hung between them, not awkward but charged, with something new, a shared recognition, a budding connection. "I'm afraid," he confessed after a moment, "afraid it's temporary, that she might retreat back into silence, that you—" He trailed off, but Ava understood. He feared she might leave too, like Clara had. She thought of her own situation, the life growing inside her, the uncertain future. Should she tell him now? Reveal her own secret? Before she could decide, Lucas went on, "I'd understand if you wanted a different life. You're young, talented. You must have dreams beyond caring for someone else's daughter." There was a raw vulnerability in his words that made Ava's heart ache. "I like the life I have here," she answered sincerely. "I like Emily, the house, the garden." She paused, summoning her courage. "And you," she added softly. His eyes met hers, surprise and something else shining there. "Thank you for telling me about Clara," she continued. "For trusting me." He nodded slowly. It's strange, he said, a small smile forming. I haven't talked about it in years, but with you it feels natural. Ava understood what he meant. Something had changed between them tonight. The invisible barriers that had maintained a formal distance, employer and employee, were crumbling. In their place, something new and still fragile was emerging. Trust. They remained there, side by side under the starry sky, each with unspoken fears and secrets yet closer than ever before. In the comforting hush of the nighttime garden, with the stars as silent witnesses, Ava realized that no matter what the future held, this moment of true connection was a gift she would always treasure. Ava woke before dawn, feeling a sharp, persistent pain low in her abdomen. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. She'd felt similar aches before in recent weeks, but never this intense. She sat up in bed with difficulty, hands instinctively protecting her belly. 5 months pregnant, and each day brought new challenges. Since her talk with Lucas in the garden 3 nights ago, there had been a subtle closeness between them, a silent understanding. But she still hadn't found the courage to share her secret. Another wave of pain made her gasp. She needed to see a doctor. Something felt off. She glanced at the clock, 5:30 a.m. The house was still asleep. Carefully she dressed and wrote a brief note. Had to step out early. Back this afternoon. Emily's lesson with Mrs. Pereira is at 10. She left it on the kitchen table, where Victor would find it while preparing breakfast. The nearest clinic was a 40-minute bus ride away. Ava slipped out quietly, closing the gate without making a sound. The sky was beginning to lighten with pinkish clouds heralding sunrise. Despite the morning's beauty, her heart clenched with worry. At the bus stop, another stab of pain made her sit, breathing shakily. What if something was really wrong with the baby? The thought terrified her. The bus arrived, nearly empty at that hour. Ava stared out the window, not registering the passing scenery. She thought of Emily, imagining her waking up and not finding Ava there. Over the months they'd created a morning routine. Ava was always the first person Emily saw upon waking. At the clinic, she had to wait almost 2 hours to be seen. The waiting room gradually filled with pregnant women, sick children, elderly patients renewing prescriptions. Ava stayed in a corner, silent, hands protectively over her belly, trying not to dwell on worst-case scenarios. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Emily woke up. Sunlight was filtering through the curtains when the girl opened her eyes. She stretched and turned toward the door, expecting Ava to come in at any moment with her usual bright smile and breakfast tray. But minutes passed, and the door remained shut. Strange, Ava was never late. "Ava?" she called, her voice still drowsy. No response. Emily propped herself up on her elbows, now more alert. She glanced at the clock on her nightstand, 8:15. Definitely late by Ava's standards. With practiced skill, she moved from the bed to the wheelchair waiting beside it. Over the past months, she'd gained more independence, insisting on doing many tasks by herself. She wheeled herself to the door, opened it, and looked into the empty corridor. "Ava?" she called again, louder this time. Only silence answered, and her heart began to race. She rolled quickly down the hall, checking Ava's room. The door was open, the bed made no sign of her. A wave of discomfort tightened her chest, something between fear and despair. She searched the entire house, the living room, library, kitchen. Finally, she found only Victor, who was busy making breakfast. "Where's Ava?" she asked, her voice unsteady. The caretaker turned, surprised to see Emily by herself so early. "She left a note," he said, pointing to the paper on the table. "Says she had to step out but would be back this afternoon." Emily felt as though the floor vanished beneath her wheelchair. Left? Without saying goodbye? Without explaining where she was going? "She didn't tell me," she murmured, more to herself than to Victor. The caretaker, sensing her rising panic, tried to reassure her. It must have been urgent, she wouldn't leave otherwise. But Emily was no longer listening. In her mind, a terrible certainty formed. Ava had left. Just like her mother. She'd gone without warning, without a goodbye. "She promised," Emily whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "She promised she'd tell me." Victor tried to console her with offers of breakfast, promising Ava would return soon. But Emily refused everything, retreating to her room, tears now flowing openly. She stayed there, staring out the window, eyes glued to the gate as though expecting to see Ava return at any moment. The sunflowers they'd planted swayed gently in the breeze, tall and strong, just as Ava had said they would be. Promises. Ava had made so many. When Lucas came down for breakfast, Victor informed him of Ava's absence and Emily's distress. "She's very upset, sir," he explained, worry clear on his face. "I haven't seen her like this since the accident." Lucas felt a pang of dread. Over the past weeks, he'd watched his daughter blossom as though waking from a long winter. The thought of her regressing terrified him. He quickly climbed the stairs, stopping at Emily's bedroom door. He knocked gently. "May I come in, sweetheart?" No reply. He entered anyway. She was still at the window, her face streaked with tears, eyes puffy and red. "Emily," he said softly, approaching her. She didn't turn, just kept gazing at the garden. "Ava will be back," he tried, forcing confidence into his voice. Finally, Emily turned her chair to face him. The expression on her face was one he hadn't seen since just after Clara's funeral, the same lost, devastated look. "She'll come back?" she asked, her voice small and broken. Lucas felt his heart crack. He knelt beside the wheelchair, bringing their eyes level. "Yes," he said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "She left a note saying she'd be back this afternoon." Emily shook her head, inconsolable. "Mom said she'd be back too." The simple statement hit Lucas like a physical blow. Emily never spoke about the accident or that night Clara left after their argument. He'd always assumed she didn't remember or had blocked it out. "Oh, Emily?" he murmured, hugging her awkwardly. "It's not the same. Ava must have had some kind of emergency." "What if she doesn't come back?" Emily sobbed. "What if she left like Mom did?" Lucas had no answers, only the certainty of the love he'd seen in Ava's eyes when she looked at his daughter, a love not easily faked. "She will come back," he repeated, praying he was right. He spent the rest of the morning with Emily, cancelling his work appointments, trying to distract her with games and stories. Mrs. Pereira arrived for lessons but left early. Emily wouldn't focus, constantly checking the clock. At the clinic, Ava was finally seen. The doctor, a kind-eyed middle-aged woman, examined her thoroughly. "They're Braxton Hicks contractions," she explained after the exam. "Normal at this stage, though yours are a bit strong. Your body's under stress." "Is the baby okay?" Ava asked anxiously. "Yes, the heartbeat is strong. Everything seems fine." The doctor paused, eyeing Ava carefully. "But you need to rest more. Are you working too much?" Ava explained her situation, the live-in caretaker job, her responsibilities. She didn't mention that she'd been hiding her pregnancy from her employers. "You have to tell them," the doctor advised, as though reading her mind. "And you need to slow down. These contractions are your body's warning." Ava nodded, knowing the doctor was right. It was time to face reality, as terrifying as it was. She filled a prescription for prenatal vitamins and was told to rest, at least 2 days. When she left the clinic, it was already past noon. She boarded the bus home, exhausted, but relieved the baby was safe. She hadn't expected the scene she found upon returning to the mansion. As she opened the gate, she saw Emily on the porch, wheelchair positioned for a clear view of the entrance. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Lucas stood beside her, one hand on the girl's shoulder, his expression taut with worry. When they spotted her, both froze for a second. Then Emily let out a sound, a half-sob, half-exclamation of relief. "Ava!" she cried, wheeling herself down the ramp, moving with an urgency Ava had never witnessed. "Emily, what happened?" Ava asked, hurrying forward despite her fatigue. They met halfway. Emily reached out and Ava leaned down to embrace her. The girl clung to her with surprising strength, as though she might vanish. "You came back," she sobbed into Ava's shoulder. "You came back." Ava looked over Emily's head at Lucas. His eyes were filled with relief and a silent question. "Of course I came back," Ava said gently, stroking Emily's hair. "I always come back." Lucas approached, his face revealing the strain of the past hours. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his gaze scanning Ava's tired features. She hesitated. This was it. The moment. Can we talk later? She asked. I need to explain things to Emily first. He nodded in understanding. Ava guided Emily to her room where they sat together on the bed. With simple words, she explained she had needed to see the doctor because of some pains, that she'd been worried. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, she said, holding the girl's small hands. It was very early and you were asleep. I left a note, but I should have spoken to you. Emily looked at her with those large, solemn eyes. I thought you'd gone for good, she admitted quietly. Like Mom. Ava's throat tightened. No. Sweetheart, I'd never leave without saying goodbye, remember, I promised. Emily nodded slowly. Why were you sick? She asked, concern replacing fear in her eyes. Ava took a deep breath. This wasn't how she'd planned to tell her, but Emily deserved the truth. I'm not sick, she began carefully. I'm expecting a baby. Emily's eyes grew huge. A baby? In your tummy? Yes, Ava smiled, placing a hand on her now obvious bump. Growing right here, Emily stared at her belly in fascination. So that's why your clothes changed? Ava laughed, surprised by her sharp observation. Yes, I've been trying to hide it a bit. I was scared to tell anyone. Why? Emily asked, genuinely puzzled. A simple question, so direct, and indeed why. Ava realized her biggest fear was losing what she had found here. Not just a job, but a home, a connection, a patchwork family. Sometimes grown-ups have silly fears, she said, gently brushing Emily's hair aside. But I shouldn't have hidden it. I'm sorry. Emily thought for a moment. Then shyly she held out her hand. Can I feel it? Of course, Ava said, smiling. Emily's small hand gently touched Ava's belly, as though handling something precious. Her eyes widened when she felt a slight movement. She kicked, Emily exclaimed, startled. Yes, Ava laughed. He or she does that sometimes, especially when I'm nervous. Emily kept her hand there, fascinated. Will the baby live here too? She asked after a moment. The innocent question went straight to the heart of the issue Ava had been avoiding. I don't know yet, she admitted honestly. After Emily finally dozed off, worn out from the emotional whirlwind, Ava went downstairs to find Lucas. He was waiting in the study, a mug of hot tea on the desk for her. How is she? He asked as soon as she walked in. Sleeping now, Ava replied, gratefully accepting the tea. It's been a rough day for her. For all of us, he said, studying her face. You gave us a scare. I'm so sorry, Ava said. I never expected it to cause such turmoil. Lucas gestured for her to sit on the sofa, where they settled side by side. Did the doctor say everything's okay? With you and... He hesitated. The baby, Ava finished, meeting his eyes. Yes, it was just stronger than usual Braxton Hicks. I need more rest. Lucas nodded, absorbing her words. How far along are you? He asked after a pause. 5 months, she answered. I know I should have told you earlier. I was afraid of losing all this. Lucas went silent for a long moment, staring into the unlit fireplace. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and resolute. You're not alone. 3 simple words, but they meant everything to Ava at that moment. The father, he began, then paused. He's not in the picture, Ava cut in. Never. Really was. Lucas nodded, not pressing for details. Well, that doesn't matter now. He turned to face her directly. What matters is that you have a place here, with us. Tears gathered in Ava's eyes. I want you to move in permanently, Lucas continued, not just as Emily's caregiver, but as part of this family. The word family hung in the air, laden with meaning. And the baby? Ava asked, her voice trembling. The baby too, he answered without hesitation. This house is big, Ava, and so are our lives. He reached for her hand, lightly brushing it with his fingers. The 3 of us, you, Emily, and I, found something special here, something none of us expected. Your child can only add to that. Ava felt the tears spill over at last. They weren't tears of fear or sadness, but of relief and gratitude, of a hope she hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Thank you, she whispered, at a loss for more words. Lucas gently squeezed her hand. "We should be the ones thanking you," he replied, "for walking through that door on a rainy day, for bringing color back to this house, for giving Emily her voice." The bonds uniting them were invisible but stronger than any bound by blood. Forged in shared pain and fear, renewed hope, new trust, and maybe something deeper they weren't yet ready to name. That night, as the house lay silent under a starry sky, 3 hearts, soon to be 4, beat in a new rhythm of belonging. The tea room next to Emily's had been vacant for years. It was spacious, with a big window overlooking the garden, where the sunflowers now stood tall. Painted a soft shade of blue, it felt like it had been waiting for a purpose. "This would be perfect for the baby," Lucas commented, showing Ava the space. "It's close to Emily's room, and it gets wonderful morning light." Ava touched the wall, feeling the texture beneath her fingers. A room for her baby. Not just a corner, but a real space where her child would grow. "It's perfect," she managed, voice heavy with emotion. Emily, in her wheelchair, watched from the doorway with bright eyes. "Can I help get it ready?" she asked eagerly. Lucas smiled at his daughter, a smile that appeared more often these days. "Of course you can. In fact, we're counting on it." Over the next few days, the room came to life. Lucas and Victor brought down a dark wooden crib with delicate carvings from the attic. It belonged to Clara's family, Lucas explained as they assembled it. Every baby in the family slept in it for generations. Ava ran a hand over the polished wood. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "It's a family heirloom. And now it's part of your story as well," he said, meeting her gaze with calm certainty. Emily took it upon herself to decorate as a mission. She drew pictures with colorful paints and paper, trees, animals, stars, flowers, to hang on the walls. Each day she brought a new creation, made with meticulous care. "This one goes above the crib," she declared, proudly showing off a drawing of bright, feathered birds. "So the baby can see pretty things when she wakes up." A new routine formed naturally. In the mornings, Ava still helped Emily bathe and have breakfast, but there was a subtle difference. No longer just employer and employee, but something deeper and more meaningful. Lucas hired a housekeeper for heavier tasks, insisting Ava focus on Emily and her own pregnancy. "You need to take care of yourself," he'd say. "You're both important." Mornings became special times for Ava and Emily. They'd talk about their plans for the day and share small jokes. Emily's voice, once so hesitant, now flowed comfortably. "What do you think she'll like to do?" Emily asked one morning as Ava brushed her hair. "Who?" "The baby," Emily clarified. "Do you think she'll like drawing like me?" Ava smiled at her use of she. They still didn't know the baby's sex, but Emily insisted it was a girl. "Maybe," Ava said, "or maybe something else. Everyone is different. Like you and me," Emily concluded thoughtfully. "We're different, but we like each other." The child's simple observation touched Ava deeply. Lucas began coming home earlier from work. Sometimes he brought small surprises: a book for the baby, a box of chocolates for Emily, flowers for the dining table, little gestures of thoughtfulness. Evenings turned into cherished moments. After dinner, they gathered in the living room. Emily drawing, Lucas reading the paper, Ava knitting small clothes for the baby. A once unimaginable domestic scene for 3 people who had known so much loneliness. On Sundays, they went out together, visiting the local park where Lucas would push Emily's wheelchair across the grass, pausing to watch ducks on the pond or enjoying ice cream under the trees. People began recognizing them as a family, smiling as they passed. "Mr. Dawn, how's your family today?" the ice cream shop owner asked one Sunday. Lucas looked at Emily and Ava enjoying their cones, then replied simply, "We're doing very well, thank you." By the 7th month, Lucas started accompanying Ava to her prenatal appointments. It happened naturally. He offered to drive her and then just walked in with her. From then on, it became routine. "Do you want to know the baby's gender?" the doctor asked during an ultrasound. Ava hesitated, glancing at Lucas. "What do you think?" she asked him. He smiled, that smile that now appeared more and more often. "I think Emily would love to know." "Then yes," Ava decided. "We want to know." "It's a girl," the doctor announced, pointing at the screen. Emily, upon hearing the news, clapped her hands excitedly. "I knew it," she exclaimed. "I knew it was a girl." From that day on, Emily included her little sister in all her daily plans. "When she's born, I'll read stories to her," she declared, sorting her favorite books. "And I'll teach her how to draw. She'll be very small at first." Ava gently reminded her, "It'll be a while before she can draw." "How long?" "A few years, really." Emily pondered this seriously. "That's okay," she decided. "I can wait. I'll draw for her in the meantime." And so she did. Every day she produced a new drawing for when my sister grows up. In each one, Emily's wheelchair was depicted, not as the focus but as a natural part of her reality. Time passed, and Ava's belly grew. Autumn arrived, painting the garden with new shades. The now dry sunflowers were carefully cut down by Victor, who saved the seeds at Emily's request, "So we can plant them again next year," she explained. "Me, you, and my little sister." As the 9th month approached, an expectant energy filled the house. The baby's room was ready, decorated with Emily's artwork, soft curtains, the old family crib made up with fresh linens, a rocking chair, sat by the window for late-night feedings. Lucas had read several books on infant care. "Last time I left it all to Clara," he said one evening, organizing a stack of diapers. "That was a mistake. This time I want to be ready to help." Ava felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. This time, as though this was a natural continuation of his family's story. Emily began marking off the days on a colorful calendar she'd drawn. How much longer? She'd ask every morning. "About 3 weeks," Ava would reply patiently. "But babies have their own timetable." "That's so long," Emily sighed. "I want to see Ava's baby now." That phrase, Ava's baby, was how Emily referred to the soon-to-be new arrival. There was both tenderness and a hint of distance in it, as if she wasn't entirely sure of her own role. It was during dinner, about a week before the due date, that Lucas brought it up. "Emily," he began, "you know that when the baby is born, you'll be a big sister, right?" Emily paused, thoughtful. "But the baby isn't in your tummy," she said, looking at her dad. "She's in Ava's tummy." Lucas smiled gently. "Families come together in many ways," he explained, "some by blood, others by heart. The important thing is that the 3 of us, soon to be 4, are a family. Different maybe, but very real." Emily considered this, brow furrowing. "In concentration. So she'll be my sister by heart?" "Exactly," Lucas affirmed. A slow smile spread across Emily's face. "I like that," she declared. "I've always wanted a sister." The next morning, as Ava helped Emily with her bath, Emily watched her belly intently. "Does she move a lot?" Emily asked. "All the time," Ava replied with a grin, "especially when I'm trying to sleep." "Can I feel?" "Of course," Ava answered, guiding Emily's hand to her stomach. They waited quietly. As though responding to the invitation, the baby gave a strong kick right where Emily's hand rested. The girl's eyes widened. "She knows it's me," she exclaimed. "Delighted." "I think so," Ava agreed, tears in her eyes. "She already knows her big sister's voice." Emily kept her hand there, softly talking to the baby, describing all the plans she had once she was born. Ava watched, her heart overflowing with love. When she'd first arrived at this house months ago, she could never have imagined finding not just shelter but a true home. The mansion, once silent and weighed down by sorrow, was alive with activity. The corridors that used to echo with solitary footsteps now resounded with conversation and laughter. The windows, once kept shuttered, opened wide to sun and breeze. For Ava, each day brought a new certainty. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. Late at night, after everyone slept, Ava sometimes slipped into the baby's room and sat by the window in the rocking chair. She gazed at the artwork Emily had taped to the walls, at the old crib, at the tiny clothes so neatly folded. "You're lucky," she'd whisper to her belly. "You'll be born surrounded by love. You'll have a family waiting." It was more than Ava herself had ever had, more than she dared hope for. Yet here she was, part of something greater, part of a family stitched together not by blood or law, but by day-to-day choices, by small gestures of kindness, by silent commitments to stay. Emily continued counting the days, marking them off on her colorful calendar, her excitement rising. "I want to see Ava's baby," she repeated like a mantra of expectation and affection. The three, soon four, had found each other in unexpected ways, brought together by chance, need, and fate. In the process, they discovered something rare and precious, a real home, not just a place, but a feeling of belonging. The ties that bound them were invisible, but stronger than any blood relation. Forged in shared pain, mutual fear, renewed hope, new trust, and possibly a love they weren't quite ready to name. That night, as the house slumbered beneath a star-filled sky, three hearts, soon four, beat in the new rhythm of belonging. Heavy rain pounded the mansion's windows that night as autumn bowed out with a storm, as though the sky wished to cleanse everything before the coming winter. Ava woke up with a start, feeling a pain unlike anything she'd felt before. Her body signaled clearly. The moment had arrived. She inhaled deeply, attempting to steady the mix of fear and excitement. She glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. "Easy there, little one," she whispered to her belly, feeling another contraction. "It's still early for you, but I guess you have other plans." She rose from bed with difficulty, walking toward the door. Another contraction forced her to pause, bracing against the wall, breathing hard. Once she could move again, she made her way down the corridor and knocked softly on Lucas's door. He opened almost immediately, as though he hadn't been sleeping. "Ava? What?" His eyes widened when he saw her pained expression. "Is the baby?" She nodded, hand protectively cradling her belly. "I think it's time." Lucas moved into action as if he'd rehearsed it countless times. "I'll get the car, your hospital bag, is it ready?" "In my room," Ava said, another contraction making her fold over. "Everything will be fine," he assured her, guiding her arm for support. "We'll go to the hospital right now." While he fetched the bag of baby clothes and Ava's essentials, another door opened. Emily, roused by the commotion, peeked out from her room. "What's going on?" she asked, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "The baby's coming," Ava managed with a strained smile. "I'm having contractions." Emily's eyes went wide, all traces of sleepiness gone. "Now? In the rain?" "Looks like she chose this special night," Ava replied, doubling over as another contraction hit. Lucas returned with the bag, finding Emily already dressed and in her wheelchair, looking wide awake. "Dad, I have to come," she announced with a conviction that left no room for argument. Lucas hesitated for only a second. "Of course," he agreed. "We're a family. We go together." Swiftly, he helped Emily into clothes suited for the cold, draped a coat over Ava, and found Victor, who appeared at the top of the stairs, awakened by the noise. "The baby?" the caretaker asked, immediately grasping the situation. "Yes," Lucas confirmed. "Could you help me with Emily and the wheelchair?" Together, they got everyone into the car. Rain pummeled the windshield, the night dark as ink. Lucas gripped the wheel tightly, driving with extra care. In the back seat, Emily held Ava's hand while Ava focused on her breathing through the contractions. "Does it hurt a lot?" Emily asked, worry etched on her face. "Quite a bit," Ava admitted. "But it's worth it. We're about to meet your sister." Emily squeezed her hand even tighter. "You're strong," she declared simply. "You can do this." Her simple words brought tears to Ava's eyes. Who would have thought she'd find such steadfast support in the little girl who, months ago, could barely speak? The hospital was quiet at that hour. Ava was taken straight to an exam room while Lucas and Emily waited. The doctor, a seasoned woman, checked her thoroughly. "You're quite far along," she said. 6 centimeters dilated. "It won't be long now." Ava was moved to the delivery room with Lucas permitted to accompany her. Emily stayed with a kind nurse who brought her hot chocolate and magazines to pass the time. "How long will it take?" she asked, anxious. "Every baby has its own timing," the nurse smiled, "but your sister seems to be in a hurry." In the delivery room, Ava was fully focused on the intensifying contractions. Lucas stood by her, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering words of encouragement. "You're amazing," he kept saying, eyes shining with admiration. "We're almost there." The world condensed into pain, breathing, and effort. Ava lost track of time, consumed by the natural rhythm of her body. Finally, after what felt like an eternity compressed into mere moments, a sharp, triumphant cry filled the room. "It's a beautiful, healthy girl," the doctor announced, placing a red, wrinkly, crying bundle onto Ava's chest. Time stopped. Ava looked at her daughter, skin still creased, eyes squeezed shut, tiny fists balled. She was perfect. "Hello there, sweetheart," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Welcome to the world." Lucas leaned over them both, his large, protective hand gently touching the baby's head. "She's perfect," he murmured, voice husky with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." After the initial checkups and cleaning, as dawn broke and the storm clouds scattered, Emily was brought in to meet her new sister. Seated in her wheelchair, she gaped in awe at the tiny bundle in Ava's arms. "She's so small," Emily whispered, amazed. "Can I touch her?" "Of course," Ava smiled. "Just be gentle." Emily stretched out a finger, brushing the baby's little hand. To her delight, the tiny fingers curled around hers. "She grabbed my finger," Emily exclaimed, her face lighting up. "She likes me." "Of course she does," Ava said. "She already knows your voice from all those times you talked to her in my belly." Emily looked at the baby, then at Ava, then at Lucas. A realization dawned on her face. "Now we're 4, right?" she asked, half statement, half question. Lucas kneeled by her wheelchair, one arm around her shoulders, the other resting on Ava's and the baby's hands. "Yes," he said, his tone brimming with certainty. "A new family." The baby was named Clara in honor of Emily's mother. "So we'll always have a Clara in this house," Lucas explained when he suggested the name. Ava couldn't have chosen better. 2 days later, they returned home. The storm had passed, leaving the air clear and fresh, the sky a perfect blue. When the car pulled up to the mansion, Ava's heart swelled with emotion. This was truly home, now the place where her daughter would grow up. Victor stood waiting at the door, a rare, genuine smile softening his usually stern features. "Welcome back," he said simply, opening the door for them. The aroma of freshly baked cake filled the house. In the kitchen, the new housekeeper, a kindly woman named Maria, had prepared a little reception. "To celebrate the new resident," she explained. While Lucas carried the bags upstairs, Emily insisted on accompanying Ava to the baby's room. Everything was as they'd left it, but with a new addition. A colorful mobile hung above the crib, tiny paper birds swaying in the breeze. "I made it with Victor's help," Emily said proudly, "so she can watch them dance while she's in bed." Ava placed Clara gently in the crib. The newborn slept soundly, unaware of the moment's significance. Little fists unclenched, face serene, breathing softly. "She looks happy," Emily noted, watching her sister. "I think she is," Ava agreed, leaning down to kiss the baby's forehead. "It's a good place to be happy." Lucas appeared in the doorway, smiling at the scene. For a moment, no one spoke. Words weren't necessary. What they shared ran deeper than language. That night, after Emily fell asleep and Clara was fed and settled, Ava sat in the chair by the window, gazing at the moon shining in the now clear sky. Lucas joined her, bringing 2 cups of tea. "Thank you," he said, sitting on the chair's arm. "For what?" Ava asked, accepting the cup. "For reading that newspaper ad, for coming here, for bringing life back into this house." Ava smiled, feeling more complete than ever before. "Thank you for giving me a home," she said simply. They sat in companionable silence, savoring the quiet night and certain that tomorrow would be bright. In the mansion that once resembled a mausoleum of painful memories, there was now the smell of cake, the sound of laughter, a crib in the room next door. A family had formed, not through blood, but through the conscious choice to remain, to build, to love. Love, at last, had found its home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.